Hi, I'm Hannah Durden and you're listening to the Outdoors Group podcast. This podcast is a call to arms to get children and young people outside again. It's your one-stop shop for all things outdoor, child, young person and education related. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Molly Mary Simmons, the woman behind Where Wildlings Flow, a Cornish-based endeavour that delves into forest school, nature workshops, map making and treasure hunts with children and young people of all ages. She's agreed to come and talk to me about her journey to forest school and why an emphasis on the seasons is woven into everything she does. Thanks for joining me today, Molly.
Hello, lovely to join you. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm going to start by asking you how you found yourself on the forest school pathway. What were you doing before and how did you stumble upon this way of being and this way of learning?
Oh, goodness gracious me. Okay, so when I came into forest school, I didn't actually know that being a forest school teacher was something that you could go into. I was studying sustainable event management at the Eden Project
Oh wow,
3 years ago now.
amazing.
I know it was incredible. It was wonderful. And I'd done 7 years of event management before, but it kind of lost its meaning because I don't know, I felt like I needed to learn way more about the environment and make sure I was doing the best that I could with events that I was putting on, and they had more meaning and they were more wholesome. And I don't know, I've always been drawn towards children and animals and a more natural way of life. So I thought, oh, this way I can expand my event management knowledge, but
Yeah.
in a much more nourishing way. Um, and whilst I was there, I made friends with Tim Smith and I started working for him at his treasure hunt museum, doing map making. Um, and whilst I was at the Eden Project, I remember I was a space queen, and this lady came up to me.
That's amazing.
It was brilliant. It was an award ceremony for a foster care company, and everyone was being congratulated for how well they'd been doing. And the lady who ran it is, in fact, my boss now. And
Okay.
I've been working with her for 2.5 years. I work freelance myself, but she's one of the lovely people I work for. And I just remember her coming up to me and she said, Have you ever thought about being a forest school teacher? Because you'd be wonderful at it. And I was like, no, I haven't heard of that, but that sounds solely rooted to how I am. So I
Yeah.
remember keeping her in mind. And I was living in Totnes at the time and she was in Cornwall. So I finished my course and worked at the Treasure Hunt Museum, and I thought I'll get that sorted before I get really caught up in forest school. But I suppose before all that, it actually started 7 years ago when I came up with a character. Well, not came up with a character. I'm going to sound bonkers, but she came to me in a forest in Devon,
Okay.
in Cockington Woods, actually.
Oh yeah,
Um,
just right.
yeah, a lovely little place with thatched cottages. And I was just going for a walk and I heard this name Flo. And I ran home and I was staying with my sister at the time. And I just started squiggling down like images of her and about cartography and map making and treasure hunts. And all this stuff was like coming out of my mind. And I had to get it all down on paper. And I
Yeah.
wondered why it had all happened. So for the past 7 years, I've been teaching myself archery, cartography, which is map making. I've been writing a book, and I say I've become the character, but I am her. It's just
Yes.
a more like extended version.
Yeah.
Um, like flowers in my hair. We haven't actually met whilst I was doing my course, but I'm always wearing flowers in my hair. And I always forget, and people always go, "Oh, are you off to a wedding?" And I'm like, "No, no, it's just part of me now. It has been for
Yes.
years." Um, and so yeah, so I started writing the book, and I didn't really know where it was going. It just felt like it was going to be this lifelong adventure. Um, and then when I heard about forest school, I thought, "Gosh, this is a way of like continuing to be entirely myself, but able to like share that with children and other
Yes. Yeah.
lovely people." And it just felt like it was, I don't know, it was all meant to come together at some point.
Oh, it's
And it all
amazing.
came together naturally. I didn't go, oh, I'm going to be a forest school teacher. It just kind of, it flowed, pardon the pun, but that's how it happened. And
I, I
it
do
started
think
from there,
life is
really.
like that, isn't it? It's
It
these
is.
things, the universe comes together, I think, in weird
Hmm.
ways sometimes.
It really does, really wonderfully. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
was a natural occurrence. So it was never like a career plan.
No.
And I'd say it's like a soul plan. Like it feels, you know how Tolkien spent his whole life writing books. I
Yeah.
just feel like this mini little pixie, like just the life is going to be a little adventure, and if it's encapsulated in a book or treasure hunts or map making or nature workshops, however it comes together, I just like to gently share it with everybody and
Oh, that's a
see where it
beautiful,
plays.
beautiful answer. I know you did your leader training with us a few years ago at our site in Exmouth.
Yes.
I'd love to know how you found that course and what was the main thing that stuck with you from that week in the woods. So for those
Oh
listening, the first school leader
God,
training is a week in the woods and then a year of coursework. So that week is how you kind of kickstart it.
yes. Okay, so the course, to be honest, I wasn't too sure what to expect because, as I said, it was completely new to me. I'd done event management most of my career, and I'm obsessed with nature. I'm fanatical about it, and I'm curious all the time. But I felt quite out of depth because I didn't know my tools, I didn't know ropes, I didn't know, there's particular things you need to know that are
Yeah.
vital to being a forest school teacher, and I was completely curious and willing and up for the challenge, but it was entirely new to me. And I remember meeting Annie and Neil, who were wonderful, and the rest of the team. And the week that I spent there, I came away every day because I stayed with my mum in Teignmouth whilst I was doing the course. Because at the time, so oddly, when I lived in Totnes, I studied in Cornwall, and then as soon as I moved to Cornwall, I studied in Devon. So I couldn't, I can't detach from either. I adore
No.
both counties,
Yeah.
and just made it more challenging for myself. But that week, I felt like I learned so much more than I ever done in a lecture.
Yeah.
And I think it was because I didn't go in thinking I'm going to learn too much or it's not academically intimidating. It would just, I would either get it or I wouldn't. And I
Yeah.
got it. And I was really, I don't know, it just being around like-minded people, and we all wanted the same thing, but we all came from different backgrounds. I mean, I looked a bit balmy when I first rocked up because I was a little bit late, and I drove down in my old Beetle, and I came through with flowers in my hair. I had a basket full of treasures and flowers, and I think people were like, "Has she lost her way? She doesn't look like the average forest school teacher." And I sat down, and everyone was so welcoming and lovely. And I remember we all had to introduce ourselves, and I would say, "Hello, I'm Molly. Love to meet you. I've never been a teacher, but I started something called Direction of Flow, where I go around with a bow and arrow and I do treasure hunts." And Neil just looked at me and smirked, and he went, "Are you the lady that goes around Totnes Woods with your bow and arrow just gallivanting?" And I was like, that could quite possibly be me.
That's
And he was like,
amazing.
"Yes, I'm sure I've seen you before." And that was kind of a really lovely feeling, that
Yeah.
he'd caught me off guard. Like, yeah, that I'm sure that probably couldn't have been anyone else. So yeah,
Yes.
that probably was me. Um, Neil and Annie were wonderful. So uh, they just had a really natural way of teaching everybody, and they both
Yeah.
had really good humor as well. So I think, and they that you could see that their relationship was beautiful. So that just repelled on everybody, like went to everybody else, and everyone
Yeah.
felt like a big team. And I don't know, it was just, I think, one of the most nourishing weeks, and I felt happy the entire time, and I was exhausted every day at the end of the day because I'd taken in so much, and it was so physical as well as mental. And but it was like the most nourishing feeling, and it just felt like that's where I was meant to be, meant to
Yeah.
end up, and it felt wonderful, and it was
Yeah.
really,
I was going to say sometimes I pop down to the courses while they're running, and I don't think I've ever gone down there and not just felt like I was being welcomed into this really kind of nourishing atmosphere. Like
yeah,
every cohort, they just seem to have such an amazing time each and every time we run one of those courses. And it's
they
great, isn't
do.
it? The variety of people attending. Like you can get people
Yeah,
from all walks.
everyone's entirely different,
Yeah,
which is just wonderful. But everyone's entirely different and wants to do not the same thing. They want to add their own magical way of weaving forest school into what they do. But
yeah,
it's just really lovely to see so many people wanting to do such a beautiful, wonderful thing.
yeah.
It's coming together authentically, and I think I was honoured to be on that course,
Yes,
and
yeah,
I
that's
loved it.
exactly how I felt. Yeah. Well, I was going to
Oh,
say it's clear from talking to you and from looking at some of the content you put out, because I love your Instagram feed. It's so beautiful.
oh, thank you.
But you obviously, being in touch with nature and the rhythm of the seasons is really important to you. Can you tell us why that is?
Okay, so
Sorry, it's a big question.
I'll try and encapsulate it. So when I work with the seasons, I base it on a theory called the phonology wheel. So I and also I love working with my hands and heart, and that's always something I ramble on about in my posts. And like weaving a tapestry of tales, but physically with nature. So with a phonology wheel, it's a circular journal of like Earth observation through the seasons. And I
Yeah,
feel that at the beginning of every term and the beginning of every season, I find it really helpful and important to I've created phonology wheel templates and I give them to all the children, and it's a way of them to keep a journal throughout the year and
yeah,
observe nature, because I think there's a lot that people can easily miss about nature, or not quite don't have the time, or um, the I don't know, maybe life just gets so busy sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah, I thought it'd be really lovely to just observe it, sit down, paint, draw, sketch, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And it's a beautiful way of acknowledging what you can forage, what you can feast on, what grows in what particular
yeah,
seasons and what doesn't. And it's all it's really interesting to me to observe each child as well, because they see everything completely differently, and it's almost like a treasure hunt for them. They suddenly see the world completely differently, and they're like,
yeah,
I can eat that, I can paint with that, I can draw with that, I can make a headpiece out of that. And you're like, yes, of course, you, as long as you don't take too much, you take a
yeah,
little and you give back to nature, then of course you can do flower pressing. And there's just endless opportunities with working with the seasons. And I think also with setting up my like 6 week sessions to go into forest school, because I teach 4 different age groups every week, so I have to come up with
okay,
4 different ways of teaching, because obviously a tiny tot won't want the same thing as a teenager. So
no,
there's lots of different ways of weaving it all together. But I think it helps me working with a calendar of the seasons to go, okay, so this summer we're going to have blackberries. Brilliant. Let's make some mud paints and blackberry paints, and
yeah,
I'll bake a cake and bring it in, and we can sprinkle it on the top, and they can learn what edible flowers there are, so we can go and gather them and sprinkle them on our snacks at the end of the day. And there's just, I think it helps me as a forest school teacher to keep in sync with the seasons. So I'm
yeah,
teaching exactly what's happening in nature as well as within our nature, but it also
that's
helps the
happening.
children
Yeah,
observe their entire world. And then at the end of the year, they've got this beautiful creation, and they've learnt so much by doing a tiny bit at a time, each season at a time.
that's
I
amazing.
think that's really
Do you,
beautiful.
it's so beautiful. Do each of your, so is yours divided into quarters or do you do it into months? Because I had a look when you mentioned it, and I know some people do them by month, don't they? Or do you just kind of do it more generally by the seasons?
More, I suppose, more generally by the seasons, but then with workshops, keep it to like 6 weeks at a time.
Yeah,
Um, so say spring's already sprung, but our workshops don't start until 2 weeks into spring, then I'll say that's the beginning of spring for them. And then for those 6 weeks we'll focus on spring, and then there'll be a half term, and then the next 6 weeks we'll focus on summer. So I kind of do it like flow like that,
yes,
in 6 weeks sections, I think is the
yeah.
simplest way to do it.
Yeah, I was only thinking it in case someone listening was going, "Oh, that's a good idea. I might do it." People always like to be get activity ideas, don't they? Either for
Yeah,
their
well,
kids
you
or
can
for the
find
workers.
there are tons of phonology wheel templates online, but you can also make your own. It's really simple. Just make a circle, divide it into 4: spring, summer, autumn, and
Yeah,
winter, and then you go out and you can gather nature's materials, or you can paint or draw them, and it's an observation wheel. So you create it however you'd like to, and then
yeah,
just slowly it builds this like earth tapestry that's just beautiful to
yeah.
learn about and to create.
Oh, awesome. I was going to say we've kind of. I was going to move on to asking what the kind of seasonal emphasis looks like in practice, but we've kind of discussed it already. I don't
My
know if there's
rambles.
anything. No, no, no. It's great. I don't know if there's anything you want to add. I was going to ask whether you find certain age groups kind of engage with this more than others? You said that you sometimes work with teenagers. Like, are they also
Yes.
just as enthusiastic as the younger ones at doing this kind of thing?
So it's really interesting, and I'm very fortunate and glad that I work with different age groups because it makes me learn as well. I think if I set to one age group, I'd think, oh, this is the way forest school goes. And I
Yeah,
feel with such a variety, it makes me more adaptable,
yeah,
and change things quickly. And so working with all ages in different environments, for instance, with tree babies and wild cubs, they are tiny. Some of them are babies coming with their mums in a sling. Some of them are tiny tots, and it goes to up to 3 years old.
yeah,
Um, and I feel like that's more of a community project. It's parents' mental health and the way they bond with their child in nature. It's
yeah,
not so much about we must do this workshop or we must complete this at the end of the day. They must have learnt that. It's more um, parents talking to each other, their children being absorbed by nature, like a simple thing as when you put a baby in a hammock, their world completely changes and they're completely in awe and they want to touch the leaves. And when the light dapples through the woods, they're in awe of it. And it's like a nature's kaleidoscope almost.
yeah,
And they're getting to see the world that they might not have been able to see before. And especially with lockdown, we started doing tree babies and wild cubs just as it all eased off. And that was a beautiful and quite an emotional thing because mums had been cooped up and sometimes with their firstborns, and they were able to come out and talk to other mums and dads and
yeah.
be with their
Real
babies.
therapy.
And
Yeah,
yeah, it was complete. It's complete therapy for them. So I find that that's more like nature nourishment, and there's no pressure on what we must create or make in the day. It's more about their headspace and them just finding a calm place to be and feel safe and within
and
nature.
arguably that's kind of the beginning of forest school principles anyway, isn't it? Like that kind of
Yeah,
child-led thing. One of the things I love about forest school so much is letting go of that expectation to have, done this activity or ticked off this, and to go, okay, actually the kids just want to do something completely different today. So I guess that's where it starts with the parents being able to let
it
go and disconnect.
it really does. And that I mean, I have more often with the older children. So with after school clubs, I do between 6 and 12 years.
Okay.
Um, and they are wild. Like you'd think at the end of the day they'd be a little bit sleepy or like not so ready to go, but they are
But they've been
electric
sat
and
down
it's
all day.
wonderful.
They've
Yeah,
got energy for
exactly.
spell.
And they're at that age where they're almost you have to be on it with your knowledge because they're so smart and they question you and they're like, so
Yeah.
why do you do that? Why do you forage that? What does that do? And you have to I don't it's really good for my mind because it really keeps me on track and in
Yeah.
right, we're doing this because of this, and this is how we make a fire, and we need all of these elements. And they're much more absorbed and ecstatic. And I don't know, some of the schools I go to, they don't know about building like natural teepees, or they don't know about fern thatching, or they don't know how to make fires. And
Yeah.
that's beautiful because you completely teach from scratch. But then you get other schools that are like, oh yes, we've had a bushcraft man in who's done this, and oh yes, or they'll just run off and gather materials, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
wow, this is amazing. So that's completely diverse.
Yeah.
But then with the forest school that I work at 3 to 4 times a week, which is where I spend most of my time, that is a completely different ball game because they're vulnerable children, most often from foster care,
Okay.
and it's more about them just being outdoors.
Yeah.
And because there's mental health involved, and because they are vulnerable children, it's a one-on-one session. So you go through the day teaching one-on-one children, which is completely different because I'm used to teaching
Yes.
like 16 to 20 children by myself, and then all of a sudden it's one-on-one. So that's
Yeah.
completely diverse. But they need that consistency and they need that connection. Um, and they need almost like ongoing projects. So you might make a wooden store with them out of reclaimed wood. You might make an owl house. You might do gardening with them, and they can learn how to build a stone wall. You might do stone carving. There's it's more
That's
woodwork and
amazing
bushcraft.
to build walls and all that. Like they're quite big projects, aren't they? Some of
Yeah,
those.
they are big projects, but because they come back, some people come twice a week, but most people
Yeah.
come once a week. I think they like the stability, so they'll come back and they'll be really proud. They'll go, look, that's what I made a couple of weeks ago, or oh my gosh, there's a bird in the nest that I made. They're more, I think because they share a lot with you, you know that their lives are quite unstable and unsteady, and I think that they really appreciate the consistency, and they see the same faces. They know that they're going to have a lovely time, and if they really don't want to do something, then I'm completely easygoing. I'm like, cool, that's fine. Well, let's go into the woods. Let's forage some hazel. Let's do some whittling. Let's have a chat. And then if you still feel like you don't want to do it, let's just continue making something out of wood. And it's a lot more. You've got to see how they present themselves, what kind of mood they're in, and then go from there. Because if they're cross or they're upset, then you don't give them a axe, do you? You don't. You give them a more gentle tool, or you get the paints out and you start painting, or you go and do identification of trees or mushrooms, or it's much
going
more.
to ask actually how you respond when the behaviour is slightly more challenging. If they've come from traumatic backgrounds and things, sometimes they might have behavioural stuff. So kind of how do you respond if their behaviour is they're struggling?
If they're angry, or if they're shouting, or if they're upset, I would never raise my voice, and I'm always I've got a very gentle approach, so I'll just sit down with them, and I think you have to have empathy, and you have to be able to listen, and don't be reactive to them. Just gently say, okay, I'm here, and if they're having a hard time and they need some space, respect that, give them their space. Sometimes I let them just go to the swing for 10 minutes. Then I might wander up and say, you okay? Should we get on with our workshop? And sometimes they don't want to speak to anybody. They just need to have some peace and quiet. And that's fine. But most of the time they come back around within 5 to 10 minutes. And you just talk to them. Some workshops, they don't even make anything. They're whittling for whittling's sake. They're not really creating anything. It's more like therapy for them. They trust you and they can talk to you. And I find that's just as nourishing
when you're doing something with your hands.
Yeah, exactly. It is, exactly. And I feel sometimes with teenage boys, I think they look at me and go, she doesn't know how to make a fire, or they come up with their like teenager presumptions. So as soon as you like put up a tarp, or you make a fire, or you use the axe, they're like, whoa, and then they have this newfound respect for me. And that's really nice, because it's a way of bonding, and them being like, oh, okay, I can do stuff with this person. This is lovely. So
also a good way to kind of break down gender stereotypes, right? If they see
exactly. It really is. It really is. And they're just vulnerable children, and they've had an unfair start to life, and it's just about being gentle with them, and not telling them what to do, and not telling them off, but not letting them get away with anything that's really bad. But if they want to shout and they need to express themselves, then let them. It's a place for them to do that, because you can see they need it. And so you just have to have empathy, and you have to be gentle, and not be too disheartened if your workshop doesn't go ahead that morning. Like, it's fine. If they've had a conversation with you and they feel happier, and you've seen them run off and they're playing with the children, then you're like, that's lovely. He didn't come in that way, and now he's happy. So that's really nourishing for them.
It must be the best feeling in the world for you, to see someone come in.
It really and see how they grow. And we do this lovely thing at the end of the day called red light, green light. So they say something they might have found difficult, but then they say something that they really loved about the day. And it's a really good way for them to gather their thoughts about their day, and then be like, oh, that was actually a really good day, because they're not really, you can tell they're not really like nurtured to think about how they feel. So it's really nice to just naturally bring that around for them, and then you can just see that they're happy when they leave.
It feeds into that kind of emotional intelligence, doesn't it? And
exactly.
A colleague of mine is really into kind of trying to help children with their emotional intelligence and grow, and actually the outdoors seems to be a really good space for them to do that. They seem to be more able to be vulnerable outside.
It's because well, in an environment where everything's vast and you can see the sky and you can see the distance, I think it's a lot more, well, it's less claustrophobic. It's more, I can breathe, and if I need to run, I can run, but not, I don't really want to run. I like sitting here, and it's calming,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you can hear the birds, and you can feel the breeze and the trees above you. I think it's a safe space for them, but it's also vast, so they could run if they needed to in their
Yes.
minds.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Exactly. That kind of fight or flight is slightly
yeah,
calmed because they know that they've got that ability to leave if they need to.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Before we start to close up, is there anything about Forest School that you were surprised to discover, if that makes sense, as you kind of been on this journey? Is there anything that you weren't expecting?
That's a really good question. Um,
For me,
oh,
I can start while you think, if you like. For me, the thing that surprised me was how hard it was to let go of control when running sessions. I think I'd
mhm.
plan sessions and I'd be like, right, we'll get the fire going and then we'll do this and then we'll do this. And I think after the first couple of sessions, one of my colleagues who's been doing it a lot longer said, well, you just need to abandon that plan if they don't want to do it. And that I was surprised by how hard it was because I'd seen it being done as an attendee, but I'd
Mm.
not had that experience. And I thought, oh, it's actually much harder than I thought to go, all right, we'll just do what you guys want to do, even if that's pushing you around in a wheelbarrow for an hour.
Yeah, I probably have to agree with that to some extent as well, because I'm with my workshops, I think so much and put so much into them.
Mm,
It's like, I don't know, it's all from my heart and soul, and I'm so like excited to share the term and the workshops ahead. But then,
yeah,
as you say, some children literally just want to go around in a wheelbarrow or climb the tree house or play in mud. But like you say, I've learned that that's absolutely fine and wonderful, because they are still learning, they're still playing, they're still
yeah,
growing. um and also with workshops, you can come back to them. And so just keep notes of your spring, summer, autumn, winter. If
and
it
try
didn't work
again
that
next
week, it
year.
might work next week. Or yeah,
Yes,
exactly. Or if it doesn't work with that age group children, then might work with the other group children.
yes,
I think it's, but also that being a forest school teacher, I've realised that there's never anything not to learn, more to teach.
yeah,
Like, as much as I teach, I also have to learn.
yeah,
And I find that really wonderful, actually, that I'm going to have to go through the rest of my life, in my career, learning before I teach, because
yeah,
there's lots I know, there's endless stuff I'm teaching and sharing that I'm already so curious about before forest school, but there's also so much that I can't wait to truly learn myself, to then teach, like willow weaving. I'd love to make baskets, and there's it's literally endless. I could talk about this topic for a long time, but
lots to do, yeah,
yeah, I think I'm surprised that there is quite so much involved in forest school, and that it can take different routes. It can stay traditional, it can go more ancestral, it can become way more grounded. We can go back to Maori people. We can think about how to, in the future, how is it going to look? Like, there's so many ways forest school can go, but there's always a really deep rooted ancestral meaning to it. And I think if you start there and you go off in your own unique ways as a forest school teacher, you're always going to do well, and you're
yeah,
always going to give an authentic way of teaching. And then everything that is going to grow from the children to you to forest school it's all natural and authentic, and it can be adaptive and take quick detours if it needs to. I think
yeah,
learning that is really beautiful, being more like, um just appreciating that things might go slower or might not go the way you wanted them to, but then they work and weave in different wonderful ways, and I think that's just as beautiful.
that's a really lovely thing to finish on. Oh,
Oh,
thank you,
okay.
Molly. Finally, I was just going to ask all my guests this questions. The first
Yes.
one is, how do you relax?
Oh, I like this question. So I rescued a dog, a puppy, 6 months ago.
Okay.
I've named him Orpheus, and he's
Oh,
a little golden Pyrenees. So he looks like a white wolf.
yeah.
Um, and I think since having him in my life, I relax by walks aren't just walks to me anymore. They're like 2-3 hour excursions, and they're foraging and seeing the world through his eyes, and like, the feeling of being in a field full of wildflowers and this puppy is just running wild towards you is like the most nourishing, relaxing feeling. And I think taking care of someone other than yourself is wonderful. Like this little soul relies on you, and I weirdly find that relaxing. I feel
Yeah.
like I feel contented by caring for people. So like with my loved ones, we all live quite far from each other. Like my dad's just down the road, but most of my family are in Devon. And then my brothers are Brighton and London. So we're all a bit spread out, but I always like making things, like writing letters on my typewriter, or making treasure hunts for my niece, or gathering materials and making things and sending little care packages off to my family.
Yeah.
I find that seriously relaxing, just making
Yes.
things in my chalet and just giving them to people. And I have this, I can't help it, but when I meet people or go and see people, I have to take a handmade treasure.
I was just about to say, it sounds like your love language is kind of craft and gift giving.
Yes,
This is really
it
sweet.
really
Yeah.
it really is. And I don't expect anything in return. I just love, like, if you potter off to a little charity shop and you find a book about graphic design for my brother, then I'll like draw him a little sketch and put it in a notebook and send it off to him. And I like the idea of, I don't know, but just loved ones having the big smile on their face by something you've
Yes.
made or found. And I think that's really
Improving
lovely
their
to
day.
relax.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
sounds like a really lovely way to relax.
Yeah,
What,
yeah, and also larking, like going foraging for pottery in like streams and fields,
okay.
finding wild bouquets. I think I don't know, the mundane I make magical in my own little ways, and I think that's where the magic is. And I think I don't know, I feel like it's really important to share the beauty in the mundane,
Yeah.
because it's what we're all able to
Yes.
hold on to. So if you can
Yeah,
find the magic
absolutely.
in that, then you're not disappointed, or you're not spending your life expecting big things. You're fanatical about a dinner that you foraged,
Yes.
or you're
Yeah.
fanatical about a gathered bouquet in your front room that you've gathered whilst walking with your friend along the
Yeah.
coast. Or I don't know, I think there's lots of magic in the mundane, and I'm always curious to find that, and I find that the most relaxing thing. Or coming home with a pocket full of pottery, that's magic.
I'm totally
And
with you. I love being outside and when it's dark and you suddenly stop and go, oh, look at the stars, and make everyone around you
yeah,
go, "Look, just look up for a second. But it's cold. It's beautiful.
it is. It's wonderful, and it's, yeah. Or just finding, I don't know, like when it's the full moon, I like going for a nighttime walk. So just at dusk, when you can hear that nature's going to sleep, I find
Yeah.
that really soothing. And then the moon's full, and I don't, you just feel like you're in nature's world, and you're not impacting or affecting its world. It's just able to be itself, and you're
Yeah.
lucky enough to be this tiny little pixie experiencing their world without affecting it, just
Yeah.
quietly observing it. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. Me
So there are a
too.
few ways that I like to relax.
They're all lovely ways to relax.
Oh, good.
What are you reading or listening to right now? So it could be books or podcasts or music.
Okay, well, oh gosh, all of it. So in terms of books, I find it really difficult to stick to one book, because I have different moods, different, I don't know, different feelings all the time. So say, I don't know if you've heard of a book called A Well-Gardened Mind by
Uh,
Sue
Not
Stewart
sure.
Smith.
Okay.
Well, it's that's normally something I'll read in the morning, and it's about this lady who's been a lifelong gardener, and she's done a lot of research on Maori people and soil wizards, and how things were nurtured back in the day, and like the alchemy of nature and rituals, and how important it is for humans to just get their hands in the soil.
Yeah.
And it's very mental health focused. It's very nourishing. It's the simplicity of life that we can all do and adapt to help us.
Yeah.
And it's a huge book. It's huge, and I've read it a couple of times, and I'm going back to it because I just find it so nourishing.
That sounds.
Um, and there is also another book. I'm in a bit of a going back to books I love phase at the moment. So I'm reading Women Who Run with Wolves. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of that. Yes.
Of course you have. It's
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm so in awe of the wolf family, and I met a real wolf pack last summer,
Oh,
after losing
amazing.
my. It was incredible. I've wanted to meet Sean Ellis and his wolves and Kim for a very long time, and it finally happened. And it kind of happened at a really poignant time because I just lost my family dog Rufus,
Oh, I'm
who was
sorry.
our entire world. Thank you. Um, and Orpheus was born 2 days before we lost Rufus, which I also found quite celestial and connected. But going to see this wolf family, there was a group of 6 of us, and everyone was in couples, and I was on my own. And Kim said to me, "Are you sure you want to sit at the front? There will literally be 10 wolves running at you." And I wasn't. I can't explain it, but I thought before I went that I was going to be a little bit frightened. But I
Yeah,
sat in that field, and I was like so ready. It was like I'd been preparing my whole life for this moment. And I
yeah,
just sat there really calmly, and they just come towards you, but they don't run at you like dogs, like puppies. They observe you and watch you, and they like magnificently crawl round you, and they like smell you, and they're really sussing you out, and you can tell they're seeking your soul. It's an intense feeling, but I was completely in awe of them. And there was 2 brothers, Mackenzie and Viper, and they're big white magnificent wolves. And they wanted to mark their territory on me, and Kim went to tell them off. And she just said that's the highest compliment a wolf can pay you, to
oh
mark
wow,
their territory, because they're welcoming you into their wolf pack.
yeah,
Um, I just found that wonderful. Anyway, I'm really focusing
incredible
this.
experience.
Talking about books, and I've gone on to wolves, but I'm going back to Women Who Run with Wolves.
Yes,
And there's this mystical, magical feeling that I have in my soul, and I know that a lot of women especially feel connected to wolves. But I feel as humans, there is endless things to learn from wolves, like how they treat their family, how they treat their elders, how
yeah.
they nurture their young ones. There's like endless beauty, and I just love going back to this book because it's nourishing and wonderful, and it feels really similar to my own way of being. So that's books, and that took quite a while to talk about. Music wise, my goodness, my music is endless, but I always find that I come back to Johnny Flynn. Do you know Johnny Flynn?
No, I don't.
So he's a folk musician, but he's also like a gentle activist, I'd call him. And
Okay.
he's I almost too pure for this world. He's wonderful, and he's a musician, but he talks about nature as if he is nature and from their perspective. And he recently created an album in lockdown with Robert McFarlane, who's also a favourite author of mine.
Yeah.
And they created this album called Lost in the Cedarwood, and it's all about being nature, being connected to nature, the raw sadness of it and the galactic magic of it. It's a real roller coaster of emotions, and I just find like I go back to his voice because it's like harrowingly beautiful and pure.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
all his words are meaning. There's meaning to everything, and there's a beautiful story behind it all. So I find that he's someone I often drift back to when I'm like need nourishment, or I don't know. I feel like every emotion I feel, I can always go to Johnny Flynn.
Oh, amazing.
Um,
Some good
and
recommendations.
then and then podcast wise, there's a few. There's something called green dreaming
Okay.
and tree radicals, and it's all ecologists, gardeners, like earth rooted folk talking about
Yeah.
what needs to be done and what is being done for nature. And I find that really brilliant because I'll just download a podcast, pop in my headphones, and take Orpheus for a walk in the evening and in the
Yeah.
morning, and it's just a really good way to learn.
Yeah.
um, when life's a bit busy, it's a brilliant time to on a dog walk just to listen to these lovely conversations going on about people, and it gives me hope as well, because there's a lot we're shown that isn't hopeful. So I think it's important to like make sure you're
Oh,
also
yeah.
listening to
Search out the
hopeful
hope
things.
where you can.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
exactly. But one of my favorite podcasts is called Ologies. I can't remember who the lady, Anne Ward, I think. So
Okay.
she talks about anything ology wise. So like
Okay.
lupinology, which is wolves, cabinology, cabins, etymology, talismans, like anything with ology
Yeah.
on it, she'll get
Oh,
someone in to
amazing.
talk about that topic. It's
That
fantastic.
sounds fantastic. Yeah.
it really, and then you're like, you come away and you've listened about how cabins were formed and how they're built, and you're like, wow, this is
I'm
fantastic.
absolutely going to put that one on my listen list.
Yeah, honestly, it's one. She's got so many podcasts, and
Okay.
you might have something that, like, you go on a walk and you'll be like, wow, what a lovely cabin, but you don't really think much more than that, maybe. But
No.
then you listen to a podcast and you completely appreciate a topic for what it truly is.
Yeah.
And it's just a really
Yeah.
lovely way to delve deeper into something you're really curious about.
Oh, amazing.
I
I've got some
think,
really
yeah,
good recommendations now.
good. Well, there's a couple of books, a couple of podcasts,
And
and a musician.
well, yeah, amazing.
And
So finally, why is being outdoors important to you? Oh,
oh gosh,
my phone went off at the same time there. Sorry about that. Thought I'd put it
that's
all on
okay.
silent.
I'm quite surprised mine hasn't, so it's okay. It's fine. So personally, why is nature? Oh gosh, nature and being outdoors important to me. I think it's also almost vital. I think
Yeah.
I have to be outdoors the majority of my day, and I feel so much better in myself and so much better with everything just by being outside. I feel I'm my most natural and happiest state when I'm entirely raw. I can be elvish, I can be deep rooted to nature, I can forage, I can frolic, I can be curious, and I can just appreciate the world that we're in. And it's, what did I say the other day? The other day I said, it's like watching an ancient theatre of nature unfold in the most beautiful way. It's a way of uh, you're able to observe nature and
Yeah.
not interrupt it. You can just be truly grateful for it.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people look up to people, but I tend to look up, well, people that I look up to are my family and the people I love. But looking up to wise, I'm so in awe of trees and birds, and
Yeah.
genuinely am like, how does this time, like, I've got so into nests recently and how they're formed and how each bird creates their own nest from sage and rosemary and moss and lichen and bracken, like each intricate, I thought nest was a nest, you gather your materials and you make your home, but for birds, like a house sparrow, their house is chaotic and messy, and they gather anything and everything, and it's brilliant. It's like an
Yeah.
expressive art piece. But then a wren is the most delicate, tiny, woven nest. It's like when you hold a fallen nest in your hands, it's the most beautiful feeling, because this tiny thing is actually so much more profound and holds
Yeah.
so much meaning to it, and you're able to experience that. Um, and I just feel like it's vital, and I feel like because I teach in nature, it's almost emotional to think about, because I'm so lucky to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I couldn't be anywhere else now. Like, because I'm now a forest school teacher, I can't
Go
imagine
indoors
ever
now.
going back indoors. Yeah,
Yes.
I couldn't do it to myself.
No.
And I love being indoors. I'm a real hermit sometimes. I love being cozy with a book and snuggling my wolf dog all night. I love it. I love being a hermit, and I love home and that feeling, because that's also so I think that's as important as nature, having your
Yeah.
safe space. And
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
that is as important as nature. But I feel like, I don't know, I just hope that the how I see nature, hopefully that is felt by other people, so that they start to, if they don't already appreciate, they start to, like with children. I don't know, it made me laugh the other day because one of the teenagers, my colleague was talking about hedgerows, and that we're going to do the next term on hedgerows, and apparently I was looking at her in deep awe, and one of the teenagers called me like the woman Peter Pan, and he was like, you're just completely absorbed, if as soon as anyone talks about nature, you're just like, nothing else matters, you're just completely enraptured in it. And it made me
But,
giggle, because that's exactly what I am like. And
but if you're
I don't
that
know, I just,
passionate, then the children that you're working with, they're gonna soak up that passion, because that's how it
yeah,
works. Isn't it? Like they
it,
soak up the people around them and what they're into.
yeah, exactly. And I feel with having Orphe now, every morning, every night we're going for a walk, and every day I'm working outdoors. I'm rare I'm rarely indoors, and until I'm getting cozy in the evening after a long hard day. And I just I don't know. I feel like our inner nature, the nature around us and the nature in others, to nurture it all, because it is all the same thing. It's all,
Yeah.
you've got to nurture one to feel the effects to another,
Yes.
and everything grows and everything is entwined. And I don't like
Yeah.
the simple thing as growing a flower. You have to sow your seed, you have to grow it, you have to nurture it. And it's the same with people, and it's the same with anything you put your time and energy into. It has to be authentic, and it has to be gentle and meaningful for it to bloom into something really
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's not real. And I think there's real magic in that. And that's
Yeah.
what I hope to
Absolutely.
bring.
Oh, it
Yeah.
sounds like you are. And for anyone that's listening that wants to see kind of what you're getting up to, where can they find you on? I mean, I know we're focusing on the outdoors, but if they're having a browse on Instagram, want to see what you're getting up to, what's your work Instagram handle?
So my work Instagram is Where Wildlings Flow, but it's where_wildlings_flow.
Brilliant.
Um, and that's where all my forest school work is.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, to those
That's an
listening,
absolute pleasure.
go and check out Molly on Instagram. And yeah, I look forward to following and seeing more of your Wolfie and lovely adventures.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been really lovely speaking to you. It's been as nourishing it is as a day in the forest. Is just talking about nature sometimes is just wonderful, isn't it? And
Yeah,
then
absolutely. Yeah.
and for you as well, working with the outdoors group, is you just seem like the loveliest, wildest, very together group of people that have the same, I don't know,
I don't know if we've
integrity to
always
what
got
you're
it
doing.
together, but yeah, I definitely think that passion kind of about the outdoors and sharing it with everyone that we meet is kind of what drives us forward. So yeah,
Yeah, I
but
think
oh,
it's
brilliant.
wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much, Molly.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me,
Thanks so.
Hannah.
Thanks so much for joining me again today, Molly. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope that those of you out there enjoyed it just as much. If you're interested in finding out more about Forest School Leader training, you can head over to our website at outdoorsgroup.co.uk/training. If not, please just give us a like, a rate, and subscribe as always, just to share the podcast further, and come back in a fortnight for our next conversation. Thanks for listening.